Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retake, League of Legends Edition, brought to you by EGF Media. My name is Jared Warnke, and tonight we will be taking a look at the LCS, what it means for our fantasy teams, and some predictions about next week. Tonight, our guests are Christian Saxby Gillespie and Dallas onyxnero Harder. How you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. Alright, let's jump right into the news. And first and foremost, the Unicorns of Love announced today that their jungler Rudy will be out for the remainder of the split, and H2K's former jungler Lulex will be in for the remainder. So if you have him on your fantasy teams, Rudy's not going to do you any good anymore. Drop him, pick up Lulex, but we'll get into that later. And in other League of Legends news, Dominion was finally removed today from the League of Legends client, and those that had previously over 100 wins before the announcement was made will receive a special icon in the upcoming days. So now let's get into the LCS breakdown. We saw a lot of great matches this week. Christian, what is your North American pick?
I was very entertained by the TSM versus Cloud9 game, as I'm sure everyone was. Two, middle or not middle of the pack, but upper tier teams just a notch below IMT. Really exciting game. Tons of kills across the board. And the one insight that I will provide is TSM would have won if double Lift's build wasn't absolutely terrible. Frozen Hammer and Essence Reaver rather than a Bork and Infinity Edge. No, that was just atrocious from him. So
Yeah, I think for that game especially, it all came down to that last fight where Double Lift for the first half of the fight didn't do any damage to anybody. He was just trying to kite away, but he didn't have
that
his W on.
gangplank.
Yeah, and then Balls and Rush just ganged up on him and murdered the man. And at like 54 minutes, you're hitting 70, 80-second death timers. Dallas, what was your pick?
Pick I chose the Mortals versus Renegades game, just because like how much Renegades improved. But even with them being up like 5 kills at a point, I think it was 5-1 actually, so 4 kills, they were still below in gold. Like it just shows how good the Mortals are. Like even if they're down in kills, they're still even in gold because they CS so much better and they just hold objectives better.
I think one of the biggest things about Renegades is Huni, because he doesn't always have to be there for the team fights. He can just be split pushing, top lane. We saw that a lot with the Echo in that game. He was just able to run around, do what he wants to do. Whereas, even though they're losing a little bit on the top side of the map, Huni's being placed bottom, taking a tower, taking 2 towers, and he's always just kind of switching back and forth. All right,
You mean for Immortals?
what?
You said Renegades, not
Oh,
Immortals.
yeah, Immortals. Christian, what was your EU pick?
I was the one of the earliest games of the week, but G2 versus Fnatic was another high kill, really exciting game. The comeback Fnatic made was extremely impressive as to not tilt, very reminiscent of their game versus Rockhat a couple weeks ago, where they fell behind a lot and then just toughed it out and came back with, the late game. This time they had Kog'Maw, last time they had Caitlyn, and Gamsu hard carried that game. This was actually one of the first games he made really smart teleport plays. His team fighting was top notch, just his zoning on Maokai was extremely impressive.
Yeah, we've seen Maokai a little bit back in the LCS. I actually really like it because you take Grasp along with his passive. He provides a lot of innate sustain that maybe some top laners don't expect out of him. And Dallas, what was your EU pick?
I chose the same game actually, because it was just ridiculous, like how far ahead Fnatic was until
G2.
oh no G2, thank you, until two team fights where one led to Fnaticing Baron, and then it's turned out and then G2 comes back and kills most of them, but then another team, the last team fight, just no one jumps on Kog'Maw, like they get him low, but then they just leave him there. Like they got a kill, they should just backed off after the kill, but they chased and then they lost because of it.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Gamers too, we've seen lose to a couple of the lower teams. Well, not necessarily lower teams, but Fnatic is the middle of the pack. They lost to H2K once, and they lost to Vitality last week. And so, do you guys think that Gamers 2 are going to have a lot more issues with these top tier teams and they just like snowball the lower tier ones? Or do you think that they're going to bring up their level of competition when playoffs come around in only a couple weeks?
I still think they're top three. I mean, Fnatic, this is the same Fnatic that they'll have a good day and beat G2 and H2K, and then they'll have a bad day and get, what was it, 13-0'd by Spalice of all teams. So I still think G2's really good. I do think Kikis is the weakest link on that team. We've seen he can pretty much play only tanks. I feel like if they put him on a carry, he would falter. So that team relies a lot on trick and perks doing work. Emperor and Hybrid are solid bot, but I think Kikis is the weak link, and he might get exposed by Cavo Shard and Odoamne, who I think are just better than him.
All right. Yeah, Dallas, what were your thoughts?
So I think for G2 that they play up or down towards their opponent. Like they don't have like a solid good game or anything. So they played down towards Fnatic, and that caused them to lose because they just played worse. Like, I don't think Fnatic is that good this year because after the changes and everything, they're not the same Fnatic, which, I mean, it's hard to be the same Fnatic. But G2 has been, they've been matching their opponents and either bringing their level down or rising to the occasion and bringing their level up to beat them.
Yeah, we saw in the Gamers 2 versus H2K game, Emperor stole that Baron. H2K made a big misposition, and Gamers 2 heavily punished them for it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump right into the teams of the week. In NA, the top of the table, Immortals still stand tall at 12-0, with CLG and Cloud9 tied at 8-4, and TSM dropping back down to that fourth spot at 7-5. And in Europe, Gamers 2, Vitality, and H2K all tied up at 9-3, and the Unicorns are a game behind them at 8-4. Christian, who's your team of the week?
Obviously, there's IMT. I'm not going to get into them. They're 12-0. They're the best. Not much else needs to be said. Cloud9 got a 2-0 week. That was huge for them. And Echo Fox, with their full roster, they've gone 4-0 in the past 2 weeks. Granted, they weren't against the best teams. They haven't played Immortals with that roster or CLG and so on, or Cloud9 the second time. So question is, will we see Echo Fox continue and get to the playoffs, or will they falter against the top tier teams in NA?
I think one of the interesting things about Echo Fox is that Froggen, I think he's been a part of like 94% of all the kills. So as we see Echo Fox possibly play a lot of these more top tier teams, are we going to see a lot more mid lane focus onto Froggen? Maybe just banning him out, focusing Froggen, and Echo Fox needing Keith to carry them back up. Dallas, who was your team?
So I had two teams. I chose Renegades and Dignitas, and no, they're not the best teams, but this week they showed a lot of improvement, especially Dignitas. Well, like the win versus TSM, them just holding out, and then just Kiwi Kid being amazing, and no one bans Alistar against them. Don't know why, always. But even like Renegade, they showed so much improvement for this week, and with like Freeze getting used to his support. And Crumbs is playing the best he's played this season. I think that they're going to do better.
Yeah, now that Gragas is back in the patch, we saw Renegades actually prioritize that in the game against Immortals, and you could really see how much more comfortable Crumbs is on that than something along the lines of like Kindred, where he was a little bit shaky. But like these tank Sightstone junglers seems to be Crumbs' wheelhouse, and now that they're sort of jumping back in a little bit, do you think that Renegades are going to be in a better position? Do you think they'll try and jump out of that 10th spot, maybe compete with Dignitas, and possibly Impulse for trying to get out of relegation?
I mean, they're in a pretty deep hole already. Like, I'm not sure that they're going to be able to get out of it. I mean, I hope they do. I love Renegades. I love Alex and Freeze. But, yeah, like, I think they're going to win some games, just not enough to get out of the hole they're already in.
All right. So let's talk about the bottom of the team. The bottom teams. So in NA, Renegades are at the bottom at 1-11, and then right above them are Dignitas and Team Impulse sitting at 4-8. Over in Europe, Rockcats and Giants are tied in 10th, with Giants having the tiebreaker at 2-10, and then Elements and Splice are tied at 4-8. Who are your disappointing teams of the week, Alex?
Not Alex, Christian.
Oh, Christian, sorry.
Renegades, they had an 0-2 week, but first of all, they were against first and second place, Immortals and CLG. So that was probably the hardest week they're going to have all split. They had an amazing early game against both teams getting kill leads, but they fall behind in farm, which is just poor lane swaps and or just poor laners in general. I mean, RF Legendary versus Huni. Huni's going to win that matchup, unfortunately. And even though they'll get kill leads, their mid and late game, they cannot transition properly. They have pretty poor macro play, and I think they can work on that. Over in EU, Giants and Rockcat, they're just bottom of the barrel, not very good, and they haven't been all split, so not much else to say about that.
Yeah, worst part about them is I looked up their upcoming schedules for the rest of the split, and they are not looking good. I think Giants are playing like Origin and H2K like this week or next week,
Yep.
and it's just going to be...
They play H2K this week.
Who in here? Who in H2?
I know for a fact Giants play H2K. I don't know what their other matchup is this week.
It could be Unicorns? I'm not entirely sure. But they just have another couple of weeks heading into it. Dallas, who are your bottom teams?
So my bottom team for NA is TSM, which is a strange pick. Like they're great and everything. I love TSM. I have a chair that's based off of them.
Yeah.
But they're great at farming. They are very, very bad at team fights. They're a group of stars. Like they're all great individual players, but they're not meshing yet. Like they're getting better than they were, but still they're not all like used to each other. And I feel like that some of them are just, like they're afraid to die with the long death timers now. Like they're afraid to fight, and it causes them to get more engaged on.
Yeah, we saw their miscommunication in the Dignitas game. They didn't have any proper words around Baron, and Kiwi Kid was just able to hide in the bush, catch out double lift, and abled Dignitas to just push down one lane, win the game. It was definitely something that TSM really needed to work on. Christian, who is your team in the hunt?
In the hunt, Cloud9, they've been doing really well. Unfortunately, they dumped Bunny for now. I am a big fan of Bunny Fufu since Splint on Team Liquid, a couple years back. But they're looking solid. Europe, we're at the point where we know the divide. The top four, Vitality, H2K, G2, and Unicorns. Bottom four, Splice, Elements, Rockcat, Giants, with Origin, Fnatic hovering in the middle, getting wins where they can. So there's not really a team in the hunt there since they're kind of, placing themselves as the split draws to a close.
Yeah, and Dallas, who is your team to watch?
So my teams to watch, I think, are me. G2, I think, are going to take first in EU. After this week, I thought they did great. They just need to work on little things. And I want TSM to be in top 3. I think they can make it a top 3. I think Immortal's going to be 1. And then, without Bunny Fufu, with just keeping high in, I think Cloud9 will get 2nd. CLG is doing great, but they have on and off games. Like 2 weeks ago, they were just destroyed. But this week they did great, so I'm not really sure how I feel about them.
Yeah, we've seen some systematic losses from CLG, especially against TSM. They were able to just curb stomp CLG in one game, and they're just kind of consistently inconsistent, I guess, against some of the more veteran teams. And I'm actually... I am looking forward to watching Vitality. They actually have one of the lowest kills out of any team, so it's really impressive for me to see their macro game kind of work out really well. Like you put Cabo on something and then you put Yarnin on, just kind of whatever AD carry he can get, and he can still do pretty well. But here, all right, we're gonna go to the Fantasy LCS, and the biggest winner this week was Jensen, Cloud9's mid laner, with 74 points. Really sucked that I had him in on my bench for a league or two. Not great for me. And the lowest, the biggest loser, was Fang, with just under 5 points at 4.98. He is Team Impulse's top laner, not really doing too well. Christian, who surprised you?
Jensen, huge week, one of the biggest we've seen all splits, 74 points. Biggest surprise for me is Betsy. He's on a 2-10 team, yet he puts up 30-plus points week in and week out. He put up 37 this week. That was a huge week for him. I don't really know how he does it. He and Airwax are kind of the glue holding Rockcat from being 0-12 at this point.
Yeah.
So
The interesting thing about Cloud9 is that 4 of their members were the top 5 scorers this past week. I think it was only Rush that wasn't like over 65 points. I think he had like 62. So everybody on Cloud9 really played really well last week. And for Betsy, more specifically, we saw him have a lot of success on Gambit, and we kind of know why, of how skilled of a player that he is. Do you think if Betsy gets a better squad, do you think that he'll still play as well?
I think so. He showed a lot of he was new when he was on Gambit. He did show a lot of promise though, and he's showing. I think if he and Airwax were to go to a better team, I think they'd star. They clearly have very good synergy on this lackluster Roccat team. So I definitely think he and Airwax specifically, that duo, could do very well on a better team.
Dallas, who are your fantasy picks?
I mean, it's the 2 top laners. One of them lost me a league, which was Hooney with that pentakill. Like, I was up by so many points, and then he just gets the penta at the end of the game and lose because of it. But also, what also lost me was Impact, only 22 points, which is real surprising. Like, I thought he would do a lot better this week, and he just got me out there. Like, most supports got more points than him, like, in our league. Even the team that I was running got more points than that.
Yeah. So, with an upcoming week, who do you guys think people at home should be playing? Christian?
G2, they have a fairly easy week this week, so I would pick up them. And if you could pick up any Vitality players, do it. They are playing Giants and Elements. It's basically a free 2-0 for them. And despite their team struggles, I would look into picking up Betsy and Gamsu if you can. Especially Gamsu, he's been also, just like Betsy, putting up high 30 points week in and week out, despite the team around them not necessarily doing so well.
All right, Dallas, who should people be playing?
Well, obviously, if there's any Immortals, G2, COGs, Cloud9, just grab those. Even if you don't need them, put them on your bench. It's an easy thing to do. But for people like you might not have, if you don't have a good carry, if you don't have like Double Lift or Piglet or like Forgiven, look at Freeze. I think that Renegades is only gonna get better, and I stand by that. And I feel like he's always been solid, and he can just get a good amount of points.
I'm gonna say if you start anybody, try and go for the Unicorns. I think they also have a fairly easy week this week. They might be the other team playing Giants, and they might be playing like Rockhat or Splice or one of those other lower tier teams. Even though Rudy's gonna be out, I think that Steelback has been performing so well, along with Fox, Chachi. They just work as a very well oiled machine, and they can kind of pick and play junglers until hopefully Diamond comes back eventually. All right.
I might pick up Lulex for the week, honestly.
Oh, don't you dare!
I'm
trying. I want Lulex. Don't you dare! I had to drop Rudy for him. All right. Let's get into the predictions for next week. So we got another week of games coming up. Christian, what game are you looking forward to watching?
North America, Cloud9 versus CLG. It's the battle for second. Cloud9 is looking really hot. CLG is looking like one of the better macro teams in Europe. Both are 8-4, I believe.
Yeah.
Regardless, they are tied for second place, and this, will separate the two, obviously. Over in Europe, Fnatic versus H2K. Fnatic somehow beat H2K the first time around, and now they beat G2. But then they give up wins against the worst team. So question is, which Fnatic is going to show up on? I think they play on Sunday, maybe.
Dallas,
Friday. Sorry.
Oh. Dallas, who are your games for this week?
Oh, biggest game for this week is gonna happen. CLG versus Immortals. They were doing the interview last week, and they asked the Immortals player. Don't remember who.
It was Adrian.
Adrian, thank you. Who would beat them out of any of the NA teams? And he said CLG. So I want to see if CLG can step up to the plate and just dethrone them. Not dethrone them, well, knock them down a peg. That's a better wording.
Yeah. Take away their perfect season.
Be the
ruiners. They don't need to come in first. They just need to stop Immortals from going 18-0. And as always, matches start for EU Thursday, Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then the NA starts at 3 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, Eastern Standard Time. And that will do it for all of us tonight. I'd like to thank Christian. I'd like to thank Dallas for joining me tonight. If you guys liked our show, please make sure to follow us on Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. All of those links are down below. And from all of us here at EGF, thank you all for watching. You can join us. I can't talk anymore tonight. You can join us next week at 9:30. We'll be back here for another episode of Retake. I'm Jared Warnke, and you guys have a good night now.
I probably won't be here.